Here is Atlantic senior editor Lauren Williams.
What does it mean to be American? Immigrants are an important part of the American story, and without them, this country would have missed out not only on key contributions in technology, business, and science, but also on the many cultural treasures that enrich our lives in so many ways. I'm joined by someone who understands the immigrant story firsthand. She's a best-selling author, the host of Top Chef, and her new series on Hulu, Taste the Nation, tackles these issues head-on. Padma Lakshmi, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me, Lauren. It's nice to speak with you.
So I just want to jump right in. We don't have that much time, but can you initially just talk about your work with the American Civil Liberties Union and how that basically led to the creation of your series, Taste the Nation?
Sure. I began getting involved with the ACLU, or the American Civil Liberties Union, just after the election, and I started getting deeper and deeper into my work with them. I work with them on immigrant issues as well as women's rights issues, and, sadly, a huge icon and friend of mine died last week, and Justice Ginsburg actually started the Women's Rights Project at the ACLU, and the work that we do at the ACLU is largely because of her in the women's rights sector and all that she paved for us. So I have to shout her out. But, I just started getting more and more involved. I started learning about all the stories with the child separation. I was separated from my parents for 2 years, but I was in a loving home with my grandparents, and it still had a very long-lasting effect on me in a number of ways. So I think when I was hearing about all of that child separation and all the atrocities that we've all heard about at the border, it moved something in me in a very visceral way. I'm a mother now, but you don't have to be a parent to feel horrified by what's going on. And so that's how my work started. I became close to some human rights attorneys at the ACLU, specifically someone named Lee Gallant, who is probably the country's foremost specialist on immigrant law. And he gave me quite an education. And, I know that I am where I am today because of a twist of fate, and I could easily have been one of those many children in another universe. And so I don't know how to explain it. It just galvanized something in me. And so we had a town hall a few years ago in Miami, the first town hall to really teach people how to lawfully protest. And I gave a keynote address there at that town hall, and I was really nervous because everyone else who was speaking was a human rights attorney, and I'm, of course, not that. So, but, I just used my own story as a jumping off point, and my work got deeper and deeper, and I started thinking about these people. And at the time, I was looking for another project to do, and I was working on a cookbook about immigrant food, and then separately with my producing partner, we were also wanting to do a show on immigration, and then we basically merged the two projects into one.
Awesome. I'm so struck by the socio-political commentary in the episodes. In one scene, there's, a chef making burritos, and you get into talking about how colonization affected Mexican cuisine, in particular, the shift from the maize tortilla to the flour tortilla. And it was masterful how that sort of translation was done. So how do you balance the tension on the show between these heavy, ugly historical facts and the beauty of sharing food?
I balance it, like every immigrant has balanced their life, really. I mean, it's hard to always be talking about such serious things. I feel that way even on my social media. I feel like I'm always screaming from the rooftops about something or other, and all I want to do is put a recipe up, but these are the times we live in. I think that all our lives are really complex. And I think in the same 1 hour of our lives, we can be crying and then we can be laughing, or we can be crying with tears of joy because we're reunited with our family. And so I think that's what life is. And I was interested in doing a documentary that looked at the emotional ramifications of food and the history of our people through food. And, I've spent my life using food as a medium to express myself for the last 20 years. And that is the language that people are used to me speaking. And so I felt that it would be a good vehicle. I mean, I think you guys said it best. The food is kind of a Trojan horse, right? To get me in to these, homes and restaurants and food trucks and dance schools and car washes, wherever we're going on any given episode. And I didn't want to do another program that was superficial or something that had, kind of lifestyle attached to its category. I just wasn't interested in that intellectually. I think those programs are great. I enjoy them immensely myself. I just wanted to do something. I wanted to do a show that I wanted to watch. And I don't have a lot of time to watch TV, even if it's my profession. So,
Yeah, no, I get it. I'd like to dig a bit into your process. So can you walk us through sort of the information gathering and the research that goes into constructing each episode? You and I had talked briefly about how, you're walking into these people's homes and you really have to gain their trust. So just how, on the front end, how do you decide which cultures you're going to spotlight? And then also, how do you go about that holistically and
Sure.
sensitively?
Well, in very broad strokes, first we created a list. Me and my producing partner created a list of communities I was interested in, communities he was interested in. I wanted to show America in all its diversity, and not only its diversity of people and ethnicities, but also diversity of land, which is why you have Hawaii, lush Hawaii, and the desert of Arizona, and the backwaters of Charleston. I wanted to show the visual landscape, the landscape of America. And so the visual language is very specific on Taste the Nation. It seeks to be at once very expansive and encompassing of our great nation, as people say, and also at the same time, very, very intimate and very just quiet. I think we have such short attention spans. We seems like we don't have time for anything more than a meme or, a Twitter feed, a Twitter post or something. And I just wanted to do something quiet. I wanted to get to know these people because it was my belief that if I could just show people that all these immigrant communities that we walk past and make judgments about are just as human as anybody else, then I had a chance. I think a lot of the rhetoric that has pushed us to the far corners of the spectrum, either on the right or on the left, have been manipulated because of political gain. And that was not my experience on the ground as an immigrant. It was not my experience of other immigrant communities who I grew up with. And so for me, the most important thing was to give these communities a platform and allow them to speak for themselves. So many people were speaking about immigrants who, were in Washington, like Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon and Trump. And I wanted to give a counterpoint to that. But I wanted to do it hopefully with kindness and compassion and not with the same belligerent aggressiveness that I was hearing all these immigrant communities being vilified, literally. And that offended me. And so the show is actually not created for people who think like me. The show is created for, people who are in red states who don't feel immigration is a good thing. And it's hopefully reconnecting them to the fact that, unless you're part of the Cherokee Nation, all of us are immigrants, even if we're a product of forced migration, as in the Gullah community with Western Africa.
Yeah. One thread I did notice throughout the show is food as a way to preserve culture. To your point, we see it with the Gullah Geechee people of South Carolina, and we also see it when you're talking with Madar Jaffrey about trying to pass Indian food down to your daughter Krishna. So can you talk about the role food plays in passing down these traditions and sort of what you learned talking to these folks from different cultures?
I think food is one of the biggest way that people, not just immigrants, but any community, passes culture down to the next generation. You think about our culture, every ritual and ceremony is conducted with food, whether it's a marriage, a funeral, a birth, a date, a dinner date, a power lunch, a power breakfast, all of it. We use food as an instrument to court others, to nurture our loved ones, to communicate a lot. And, I think that is a good way in because it's non-threatening. Even Ted Cruz likes tacos.
Was there a time where you had like an outline for an episode and you went in thinking it was going to turn out one way and it didn't at all? Like anything that surprised you in the field while you were conducting these interviews? What were some things that surprised you?
What surprised me was the immense food knowledge that all of these average people have who are not really average once you get to know them. And I'm of the firm belief that everybody has a compelling story if you're just willing to listen. I had an incredible day in the Arizona desert on the reservation. I'd never been to a reservation before. Went to the San Carlos reservation and talked to Navajo and Apache people and spent the day with Twyla Casador, who is this amazing seed carrier, and the amount of breadth of knowledge that she has about the flora and fauna of that region of the country. And it's all oral, so she's actually taking the time to catalog it all and share her information with other indigenous tribes to sort of create a body of information that would really help all Americans, because a lot of the practices of indigenous people, even with the fires just now on the West Coast, the indigenous community has a practice of purposefully burning certain forests or certain amount of trees every year to prevent what's going on. And we've just lost that. It was outlawed decades ago. And so all of these practices, all of the practices that they have regarding, how to live off the land but love the land was hugely informative to me. And the Gullah people also taught me a lot. I became close to BJ Dennis, who is a chef in Charleston, several years ago when I went there to film Top Chef. And I just really had an affinity for the culture, and I just got to know people there, and I knew that I wanted to go back there, and I was really happy. That episode, the El Paso episode, and the Indigenous episode, I knew that I wanted to do even before I sold the show. And those were very important to me because we never talk about African American food as an immigrant food culture, but it's just forced migration. And, what people don't understand is that those West African enslaved people who came here were brought here because they were sought out for their skills, their expertise, their knowledge of cultivation and agriculture. And they're hundreds of years of tradition. They didn't walk onto American soil not knowing anything. They brought so many things that we think of as quintessentially American, like the banjo. That was brought by enslaved people. Bene seeds, which are sesame seeds, all these things, beans. I mean, you look at red rice in the South, you can't help but see the ancestry to Nigerian jollof rice. And I think that's all interesting. And I didn't learn any of that in high school. And I'm a product, or college, but I'm a product of the American educational system. And I should have learned that because that can be a real point of pride, not only for the African American community, but for all Americans. There's so many ugly things that have happened in our past. And if somebody lifts themselves up and their family and removes themselves from their home, their land, their culture, and goes somewhere else, it's usually because they have no choice. It's usually because that is the better choice. So a lot of these people have come here through some trauma or, some kind of event or circumstance in their life that they're, coming here for. And so, even though a lot of our history is painful, I believe that there is merit in looking it squarely in the eye, because if we don't, then we'll always be ignorant, we'll always be in the dark, and we'll always have the same presumptions about each other. And that is what I really wanted to look at. I wanted to document. I wanted to show. It's obviously an editorial show. You know, it is not a journalistic show. It is my point of view, clearly. But I just, you know, I found these. I grew up amongst these people. I grew up in a very blue collar, middle or lower enclave in Southern California in high school. But before that, I was in the city, and I lived in Queens, so in New York. So like these are the friends of my parents. These are the people that I grew up with, and they're just like me. And I don't think a lot of people associate me with that kind of immigrant community because, I'm on a red carpet or whatever. But actually, they're no different from you and I just wanted to show them in all of their complexity.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Padma. Thank you for being with us tonight. It's been a great pleasure having you with us.
Thank you so much, Lauren.